I'm Lee Bristow, host of Saros Insights and Director of Cyber and AI Governance. At Saros, we partner with the world's most recognized brands to make the complex simple. My aim is to deconstruct the strategies of Ireland's top business leaders, from AI governance, digital transformation, and some that are even scaling through acquisition. We're playing a bigger game, uncovering the human stories behind the technology. Welcome to our show. Today on the Saros Insight podcast, we have Rob Cowan with over 30 years of experience in technology, telecommunications, and cybersecurity. Rob is the managing director of Aviareto Limited. He operates the International Registry of Mobile Assets under the Cape Town Convention. Based in Dublin, the registry is a highly secure online platform serving the global aviation finance industry. Rob, welcome to the Saros Insight podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me along.
So, Rob, maybe you can give us a quick overview of your mission that you've been on since the start of your career, either looking back over the last decade or even from the beginning.
Okay, well, the beginning is a long time away, so maybe I'll just start 10 years ago. So I suppose there's the professional element, my job, and then kind of my personal development journey. So I run a technology firm. We're in the aviation finance sector, and cybersecurity is central to everything we do. And in the last 10 years, we've gone through various crises, as the industry has gone through crises. So my job, really, my mission has been to maintain the highest standards, particularly of cybersecurity, in the business we're in, and then allow us to grow, expand, and essentially run the business where I learn from my customers what their needs really are rather than what I imagine they are. So that's been on one side of the house. On the other side of the house, I'm probably related to my job because in my job, I deal with a lot of international organizations. So it's not just the pure technology. Most of the people I deal with are lawyers. I deal with a lot of academics. I deal with a lot of people in the international organization space. So what I've done in the last few years is realize that I needed to broaden my skills beyond just security and just technology and just business. So in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been doing a master's in international affairs and cybersecurity in King's College in London because I realized that I need to broaden my vision of what the job is that I do. So that's been my journey for the last 10 years.
But before Aviareto, you managed the subsea cable with Tycom. I think that must have been a really interesting period in your career.
Mm-hmm.
But what did the experience of protecting that critical infrastructure? How did that area of work or that period in your career shape your approach to Aviareto, especially around the security and the importance of understanding that critical infrastructure?
Yeah. So like I just found myself smiling when you mentioned that job. I did really enjoy that job. It was a very broad job. So there was, from an engineering point of view, and I'm electronic engineer originally, there was all sorts of equipment in the various cable stations. So just to explain the network that I've managed, there was a cable station in Coolock in Dublin, a cable station in Liverpool, one in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Canada, and one in Lynn, which is just north of Boston. So we had 4 cable stations with various cables going across the Atlantic. There was 2 cables across the Atlantic and cable to the UK from here, a cable from Halifax to Boston. And at the end of each cable was a big building full of equipment. A lot of that equipment was telecoms equipment, but because of the way telecoms networks are designed, they're highly resilient. I think far more resilient than probably IT systems are. So that was one of the things I learned. I had been dealing with kind of switch networks.
Yeah.
I was dealing with transmission networks, which had the lower layer. But when you look at the power, the way they designed the power systems, the air conditioning systems, everything was fail-safe. We really, I think, did redundancy and resilience to a level that it would be hard to do and probably hard to justify in kind of a normal IT type technology setup. So I learned a lot from that. But I think probably dealing with people in other countries, having to manage teams in 4 different countries who had totally different cultural expectations of how things work, even though you would think, 4 English speaking common law countries, quite different. So it was a very exciting time.
Your first taste of international relations.
My first taste of internet, yes, I suppose it was. I suppose it was my first. I mean, I had obviously been in aviation before that and dealt with a lot of
Yes, of course, with Galileo, yeah.
UK and US companies, but this was the first one where I was actually having to manage people, and then even our customer was a multinational. So you're dealing with, their key people in different countries. So it was a very exciting job. I think uh, the technology was exciting, just to learn about the technology and to see the scale of what we were doing. And then safety was a really big issue, which, when you design your systems around safety and your processes around safety, you have to go up a level.
Yeah.
So with telecoms cables under the sea, most of them are powered and they could have 7,000 volts DC. And if you touch something like that, you'll just more or less evaporate. So you've got to be really careful, and you have very stringent processes in place for the electrical system. So a cable station is not a safe place to be, but the processes in place have been honed over 100 years to make the place safe. So it was great to be part of the historical element as well, I have to say. So yeah, it was a great job. It really was very interesting.
That was a very visceral image that you gave there of the literally vaporizing the human that touches that.
You don't want to touch that cable. You don't want to touch that cable, that's for sure.
But I am going to actually take a very hard left turn into cybersecurity.
Right.
We're going all the way around again into the cybersecurity world. And one of the pieces I wanted to touch on was around culture. So when you're building out an organization like Aviareto, how do you inculcate a consistent and continuous message about how important security is inside the organization? Because it has to be at every level, at every decision that is made. What was your approach?
Okay, well, I think the first thing is that as the leader, you actually have to believe that. You have to really believe that this is because people can read you and they know this is important to the business.
Yeah.
So a few things I would say from our experience. We have this phrase in Aviareto. It is tell it to the judge, right? So when you're designing a system and you're thinking, we don't really need to put the encryption in that. We can take a shortcut. Someone will say, tell it to the judge. We're kind of thinking like when things go wrong and I'm standing up in court trying to explain to the judge or to a very clever barrister why it's not our fault. I want to make sure we've made all the right decisions in terms of how we design the system, took all the right approaches. We don't take shortcuts. And the other thing then, and this is something we learned from aviation, or I learned from aviation because I had a stint in the Irish Aviation Authority at one stage, 4 years, fantastic place. And I learned a lot there. But one of the things I learned was how they approach aviation safety. And the way they approach aviation safety is a no blame culture. Okay. So if an air traffic controller makes an error, if you blame them and they think they're going to get fired immediately, they will hide it. And that's the worst thing you can do. So what you have to do is allow them to know that they can come and explain, I made that error. And then people think, well, oh, I wonder why that was. And you delve down and you say, well, I'm a human. It was a Friday night. I was tired, whatever it might be. And you allow them to grow and your organization might improve its procedures, etc. So for us, and I think one of the worst things you can do is when someone clicks on that test phishing link and you bring them in and, make them look like a fool or force them to go on training, that's the wrong thing. And I like one of my managers who's the head of technology and excellent at all this type of stuff. He clicked on the link once and he used that example. He told everybody in the company so people realize it's a safe place to come and actually say, when you spot something wrong, you can say it. So there's that. And also we have insisted that everyone in the company every single person in the company is certified in cybersecurity. So they all go on a 5-day training course. They have to pass the exam. And if you don't pass the exam, go back and do it again and pass the exam. We can help you do the exam. So every single person is certified in information security, and because it's just so important. So I think there's absolutely no doubt when you join Aviareto how crucial it is, but also that it's actually interesting and fun, and you will not be crucified if you make a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, everyone often talks about having a safe space, and it's always very theoretical.
Yeah.
The practical version of that is exactly what you've just explained, is that there is acceptance for mistakes as long as you were trying your best to do what you were supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And stories are great. Stories are great when people explain how they were nearly conned, how a phishing attack looked so, um, so genuine. And then our technology people explain to the staff the type of things they're doing to secure this. So, recently, maybe last year or the year before, we developed some technology where if, we're getting kind of scanned by a particular address,
Yeah.
on the fly, we reconfigure our firewalls automatically to block that address.
Yeah.
And that's quite a proactive step. And I was actually really delighted that our staff did that. And I made sure that our technology staff could explain to everybody, and everyone can see that this is continuous improvement. There's no standing still. We look for little places and we try to fix them.
Yeah.
So that's it. And everyone knows, because of the nature of our business, like, it's not that we sell chairs and this would kind of damage our business. We sell trust. We are an online business. We have to have cybersecurity.
Yeah. When we talk about, you just mentioned your entire team goes on a security course, and I think that is fantastic. That is the definition of leading from the top and making sure that cybersecurity culture is inculcated into the organization. When you look at a slightly wider view, so certifications, so organizational wide certifications beyond the individual, I know that there isn't, and there's two. One, there is potentially a sci-fi one coming through from the National Cybersecurity Agency, but there are also the SIR directives, and there's 27001, and I know your organization is also one of the leading or first organizations. I think it is to get the resilience certification, ISO certification.
Yeah, 22301.
That's the one.
Yeah,
Business continuity.
we're the first company in Ireland to get that.
That's fantastic. What was the journey for that? What was the journey like?
Well, it's all based. Well, first of all, it's all based on when we got ISO 9001. That was our very first kind of success. And like in the old days, and I remember working in other companies where ISO 9001 was seen as an impediment. It was seen as box ticking. And when we brought in 27001, and then, which is information security, and then 22301 business continuity, I've always said to the staff and to the auditors that I actually find these standards useful in running our business. So I don't see them as an impediment, as a tick box that has to be done. They actually add value if you do them properly. But if you want them to add value, you really have to lean in and commit to them. And I think for us also, we've had some. I mean, we've got very highly qualified people in this area. They've gone and done all the courses, and they are listened to when they speak about how we should run the business. And I think I'd have to hand a lot of the credit for that to some of the managers and staff who worked on that over the years. So it's actually been. I mean, one of the reasons we got it initially was because we're a global monopoly. So we have to be able to prove to the world that we're doing a good job. And me standing up on stage and saying we're doing a good job is not enough. So ISO standards were a great way of being able to prove that our security was adequate, etc. But once we got it, we realized it actually adds value if you commit to it. So it has been really good for us.
I heard something the other day that I really liked. There are two types of people in the world: those that get management systems and those that don't.
Yes, that's. I mean, listen. There's also times in a bit where a business maybe shouldn't get straight into 9001 or business. These things can slow you down a little bit in your entrepreneurial days. You want to make mistakes and break things. We didn't have the option of breaking anything. We had to make sure we did it right. But I have to say, it actually adds value for us. It's not an impediment. Every now and again, you might be in a meeting where you're cursed, I have to say, but that's a short-term thinking. It's a long-term thinking, and we're a long-term thinking company.
Over your master's degree through King's College. You've done a lot of research. And how is your academic perspective changed over the course of that degree that you've been doing, with the regulations that are coming in, with the new standards that are coming in, with the change of cybersecurity and AI? How has that all changed? Because in your period of studies, AI has become a leading factor.
Yeah, it has. And I suppose, listen, it's difficult to be able to judge yourself. Awareness can be difficult. So, but what I'd like to think is that I see things in a bigger context now than I did. Um, so when I see what's happening with AI, I'm seeing the, you know, the benefits it's bringing. I'm seeing the various parties, industry wanting to exploit it, the concerns of the public, government and governance trying to manage it and control it. I'm seeing the military side. That was one of the, one of the courses I did, one of the modules was AI in warfare, essentially. And the big issues were ethical issues and human in the loop. And
Yeah.
the loop they talk about is a military loop that is often discussed. So human in the loop, because an AI device targeting humans might see what it thinks are 3 trenches, but actually they're 3 prams.
Yeah.
So the ethical element is really important. And then there's the exact kind of thing we have in industry, the exact kind of clash, which is, well, if the enemy is going to use AI and they don't care who they're killing, then are you going to restrain yourself?
Yeah.
And so these are things that need careful consideration. Anyone who thinks there's a simple answer really doesn't get the question. So I hope it's allowed me to think about it more broadly, maybe just to appreciate the type of decisions that are on people's desks at the moment around the world, and that this is not a simple thing, and that there are sometimes factors beyond what you're even thinking about when you're looking at these decisions. Sometimes it seems like crazy decisions that governments make. Often it's because you don't understand the bigger picture that they're forced to see.
I fully agree with you. In terms of the ethical conundrums that individuals will face at different roles and at different levels across many different organizations, whether it's in government, whether it's in the armed forces, corporate, non-for-profit, and schools. So, those are big areas that will absolutely affect AI. But from a security perspective, we saw last year in November, Anthropic publish a paper around the fact that they were essentially leveraged as a platform for a nation state attack against the US. Thinking about that going forward, when you've got these hyperscaler type infrastructure capability with advanced persistent threats coming at you, how do you defend against that as a critical infrastructure?
Okay, so
And that could be hypothetical. I'm
no,
putting it out there as a
no.
big hypothetical question.
So there's a few assumptions in the question. One assumption in the question is that you can defend, right? That you can defend, and there's an alternative, which is to deter, right? And if we go back to, say, Obama's administration, at one stage he declared that a cybersecurity attack on America, a serious one, would be the equivalent of a military attack. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that seems to have gone by the wayside because there's so many cyber attacks. But I could imagine a world where the normative kind of pushback on attacking and using these tools is so high that you might say, yes, someone uses it, but they are now cast out from society. They're in terms of the society of nations. We don't deal with them and we come down really hard. So that's one option. I think the other thing I see with this is that, and people talk about strategy all the time, and when I talk about strategy, I like to differentiate between a plan and a strategy. Okay. So it's even more important now to be strategic in how you develop your cybersecurity programs and postures and your approach to cybersecurity. So strategy is often about, certainly in the business world, is often about saying, what am I going to say no to? And what am I going to say yes to? And the idea that you can do everything like we used to do is probably impossible given the nature of threats. Now, obviously, we'll be attacked using AI platforms. We'll also defend using AI platforms. But I think we all know the mythos platform that's there that hasn't been released to the public because it's so good at finding vulnerabilities, found tens of thousands of vulnerabilities. How do you defend against that?
Yeah.
So, so I think that's where you need the technical skills, but you need the strategic thinking to decide how you're going to defend against that. Can you defend against that? Can you deter it? And then I suppose this is where the whole world is turning towards resilience, and it's, not that it's a new idea, but we all know that you've got to assume that you're going to be breached. All your data is going to be wiped. You need to be able to then just like press a button and start again. So resilience now is even more important. So I think it needs a higher level of thinking now than the pure technical level of cybersecurity.
Yeah. I'd like to do one last kind of right turn in terms of topics. You actually brought an undersea cable item with you. So if any of the listeners actually have a camera, I think this is the time where you potentially look at it.
It is as simple as that. And there are hundreds of them all over the oceans.
Perfect. Rob, thank you very much for your time. Really, really enjoyed that.